Chapter 7 is on enhancing communication skills in groups. The first thing we have to consider with communication is that words can be both barriers and a bridge for communication. So you might think that you're speaking with somebody innocently, but the way you word something or the tone you use could make somebody defensive or offend them. There are three main types of word barriers. The first is called bypassing, and it's when two people will have a separate definition for the exact same word. The next is an honest statement, and that's a statement that might be easy to fall back on and use, but it's usually not true, and it could be something like a stereotype, for example. The last is called fact inference confusion. This is when people respond to something as if they've experienced it or seen it, when in reality they're just guessing. Listening is a huge part of group communication. There's different styles, obstacles, and there's actually a guide for active listening in the book. But first, we need to know what listening is and why it's important in the first place. Listening is actually a skill that we're not born with immediately. Active listening can be improved through practice, but if you don't improve it through practice, you can have poor listening skills, which can cause conflict in groups quite often. A listening style is a preferred way for somebody to make sense of the message that they're being given. There are actually four main listening styles, and most people will fall under one of them. The first one are people-oriented listeners. They're comfortable listening to feelings and emotions, and because of this, they're considered other-oriented. The next type is called content-oriented listeners. They're people who really enjoy rich content with information in it, and they enjoy complex and detailed forms of that information as well. Because of this, they're really great group note takers. The next is action-oriented listeners, and they prefer the most brief, organized, and error-free version of the information that you could possibly give. And because of this, they really are great at keeping groups on task and organized for anything. Time-oriented listeners is the last one, and I feel that most people will probably fall on this because they prefer brief messages due to the fact that they have time constraints and are usually busy. They don't have much time to listen, so they're always aware of the time that they do have to listen. And because of this, they're really great at keeping groups on schedule and within time limits. Listening obstacles can be a huge problem because we don't really think about them when we do them. It kind of just happens naturally for most of us. Prejudging is when you see somebody and you anticipate that either you don't like them or the message they're going to say is going to be offensive or you don't like it. So you'll begin to tune them out without even being able to listen to them. But you can't do that because you have to remember that good ideas can come from anyone, and ignoring somebody could mean missing a really great idea. And rehearsing responses is something that most of us are probably guilty of without even realizing it. It's when we're talking to somebody and we don't pay attention to what they're saying, and instead we are looking for ways to inject our own point of view into it. And this is caused by our speech rate being slower than our thought rate. If you're wondering how to be a better active listener, the book provides an excellent guide. There are 6 steps. The first is to stop what you're doing and eliminate distractions. Things like your cell phone, other people, what have you, are a great distraction, and if you can get rid of them, by all means do it. The next step is to look for clues that will tell you how the person is feeling. This will go hand in hand with the nonverbal communication that I'm going to mention in a minute or so. The third step is to listen for what people are telling you. This might seem obvious, but it's not always going to be through words. You have to pay attention to what they're saying with their body and their face. Step 4 is to ask the right questions so you understand better. Don't be afraid to do this, and once you do, use step 5, which is to paraphrase that content they give you back to them in their own words to ensure that you know that you got it right and to show them that you understand. And once you do this, you can also use step 6, which is to paraphrase feelings for clarity. This will help show the person that you are understanding how they feel, but it also helps you out as well. Nonverbal communication in groups is extremely important because it can really change the tone of a communication sequence. But what is nonverbal communication? Well, it's behaviors in communication that don't need written words or spoken words to be conveyed. It's things like body language, facial expression, tone, even the way you sit, seating arrangements, and spatial relationship as well. But why is it important? Well, it actually happens a lot more than spoken words. You can communicate with somebody without talking at all if you're sitting there with your arms crossed and looking around the room. Because of this, it can also show emotions and feelings through those nonverbal cues. So somebody can understand how you feel about their message before you even open your mouth. And because of this, the nonverbal messages are way more reliable than actual words. If somebody's sitting there saying they're happy but their arms are folded and they're slouching in their seat, chances are they're not actually happy. There are a few types of nonverbal behavior that are main. The first one is an emblem, and it goes hand in hand with a specific verbal counterpart. The next one is an illustrator, which basically just adds meaning to whatever the person is saying. There is an affect display, which basically just shows communication of emotion. The next one is called a regulator, and it regulates the flow of communication. And the last is an adapter, and it helps people adapt to their environment around them when it comes to communication. Eye contact and facial expression are a large part of nonverbal communication because your facial expression can tell people a lot about how you feel. Your eyes and your mouth are the most expressive parts of your face, and that will give away most of your feeling in the beginning. The next functions that I'm going to show you are all functions that your eyes actually do when you're communicating with people that can show how you feel about the message if you want to talk at all. It'll give feedback, and it shows a thought process. So we have to be conscious of our eyes when we're communicating with somebody. Vocal cues are also a huge part of communication. It's also considered what's called paralanguage. It's pitch, rate, volume, quality, and tone. It shows somebody how you feel. Now, but it's a huge thing about this is the book likes to say, it's not what you said, it's how you said it. I've heard it said a million times. I've said it to my husband before in arguments. Your paralanguage can get you into more trouble than what you're actually saying sometimes. And because of this, inferences are so easily made based on vocal cues. Somebody can get into an argument based on the tone of their voice, not what they actually said. Personal space and seating play a huge role in nonverbal communication when it comes to groups because it can show how comfortable you are in a group. Everybody's pretty aware of their own personal space for social interaction. You're probably not going to feel comfortable if a stranger steps into your intimate personal space. And that's because people tend to follow trends that make them feel most comfortable. It's your space. It's like when you pick to sit in the same seat every day in a class, and then suddenly somebody comes and sits in it, which is based off, when that feeling comes out, it's based off of territoriality, which is actually how animals stake and defend their chosen areas. Now, these spatial zones are very critical to social interaction because if somebody breaks one of those, it's going to make you uncomfortable. Small group ecology helps us understand why people arrange themselves in different spatial relationships in small groups, which has a lot to do with the seating assignment that you pick. Unfortunately, personal appearance and environment play also a huge role. And I say unfortunately because a lot of people will make first impressions based on personal appearance alone. This is things such as outfit, hairstyle, weight, height, even skin color can give a first impression to somebody. But we also have to remember that attractive environments play a huge part in communication as well. If you already are around people that you have made first impressions of and the area you guys are in is bad, it's going to lead to a whole different comprehension set, and you guys probably won't work as well together as you'd hope. Nonverbal cues in groups, when it comes to the functions and effects, are very important to understand if we want to be able to communicate effectively. When it comes to nonverbal cues and leadership, they play a huge role because when a leader is talking, they tend to use more nonverbal cues to sort of control the flow of the group, and that helps a leader be more perceived or less perceived in a group. And because of this, when you mirror somebody's actions, it can tend to make you seem more persuasive to others. Now, synchronizing interaction and clarifying integrity really go hand in hand with that because people will respond better to more patterns when it comes to physical and rhythmic communication. So, because of this, people are known to be seeming a little more honest or dishonest based on those patterns. Basically on this list here, you can tell if somebody's being honest or dishonest if they're smiling less, they have less eye contact, more lag time responses, slower speech. That could be somebody lying to you. This is the huge part of the chapter though. It's understanding what that nonverbal communication means. It has a huge thing to do with understanding the reactions of others. So you're looking for things like immediacy, power, and even responsiveness. Those are things that show what those nonverbal communications mean. And a way to do this is by perception checking because others will judge by behavior and not your intent. You are the one who knows your intent, not others. So a simple guide is to observe nonverbal cues, mentally draw a conclusion, and to ask at the end. Some other things to consider before I go. A person's cultural background and gender can affect how they communicate. Remember that. And because of this, we are all different and respond to different things in different ways. Don't make a snap judgment on somebody based on what you see. And remember that first impressions are not always correct. All right, guys, that's it. Thanks.